Slack has been on a bit of a roller coaster since their IPO last year, and they've been getting creamed in the last few days too. I'm going to break down what Slack is, whether or not I'm going to be investing in it, and some thoughts for you to consider if you're going to be investing in it. Slack just dropped their second quarter earnings. Their stock price has been on a bit of a roller coaster since their IPO last year in 2019. And they've been getting kind of face kicked the last few days in their stock price as well. Is Slack a buy? In today's analysis, we're going to take a look at them. So I mentioned the roller coaster that Slack's been on. We see a 52-week high of $40 with a 52-week low of like $15. Right now they're kind of 25-ish bucks, but even just a few days ago they were at $30, $35, something like that. And it's been a really rough roller coaster ride for Slack since they IPO'd last April. In their second quarter report, it shows that they beat expectations. A lot of people were saying, we think they're gonna make this much. They came out and said, no, we beat that. We came out with more revenue. We're growing more clients. But their stock price is still going down. What's the deal? Take a look at the stock price chart here. That goes all the way back to when they started, all the way up to almost now. I think I screenshotted this a couple days ago, but basically you can see how kind of tumultuous it's been. Many stocks in March, we basically just saw them drop off a cliff and then either V back up or kind of slowly trend back up. It's a very different story with Slack. So what's going on? But first of all, I want to talk about Slack, what they do, who they are. So as you know, typically at work, when you're doing like professional communications, not face-to-face, it's almost always done on email. In our small company here, for a long time, it was basically a combination of face-to-face plus iMessage plus email kind of thing. We have teammates overseas or teammates on other islands where it was mostly email, but a lot of it was also kind of like iMessage or things like that. Ended up being a lot of friction, which is basically like, oh, this little thing is nagging and frustrating and like, I can't really do this well, or I can't like search for, what did that guy send me in that message or that screenshot the other day? Can't quite remember. How do I find it? Oh, I just gotta scroll all the way back up on my phone or something like that. It doesn't make for a very productive workflow. So basically Slack's sales point is we're the new version of email. We're replacing email. We've been using Slack at our company for a while now. Interestingly enough, we got a new guy coming to our company from Silicon Valley and he's like, hey, check out Slack. It's dope. And we're like, yeah, whatever, who cares? Our system kind of works already good enough. But after we took the time to listen to him, he kind of like evangelized to us the idea of Slack and how it works. Now that most of us have it, we're like, dude, Slack is awesome. Apparently, that kind of way of growth is very common with Slack. Somebody falls in love with it, goes into their company, and then just shares it naturally from the inside. And what it is basically like, in our company, like we have like YouTube stuff, we have like apparel stuff, we have like media stuff, we have tourism stuff, we have all these different projects going on. Some of them are everybody, and some of them are these 5 people or whatever. So you have different channels. And I, as the boss, can see all those channels and see what's going on and kind of track what's going on in those different channels. But what's really dope about it is that in that channel, let's say we're talking about a specific shirt design or something. We have a shirt design, and then somebody else is talking about something else, and then somebody else is talking about something else, all within that apparel channel. We can then break off and have a conversation just on this one message that somebody posted. So that kind of really detailed, really like specific conversation and communication ability definitely is superior to email. We also have like programmers overseas and stuff like that, and we're constantly working on different projects, and being able to separate those out into different things rather than just having like a few different emails all going on at the same time makes it really easy to kind of track what's going on. So generally speaking, that's what Slack does. That's why they're growing really well. That's why the people who like it really like it. But the question is, are they profitable? Is the stock worth the price it's at right now? So let's take a look and dive into that. Before we look at any of the specifics, I should mention that it's kind of a freemium model, similar to like the Dropbox video that I mentioned recently, where it's free, super easy to set up on your like laptop, desktop, tablet, phone, all these things, and you can get notifications everywhere. It's just like a really great user experience. And so freemium model, you set it up, and then after a certain threshold of messages, Or if you have too many users, or if you want to be adding in different integrations. So for example, Dropbox, in our chat, I can just plop in like a 5 gigabyte video file and it handles it fine. Like you can't just do that in email or iMessage or whatever chat app, AOL Instant Messenger or whatever. You can't just do that. So it makes it really easy and it gets you into it and you're kind of invested. And so after you reach those thresholds is when you have to start paying. And it's typically per user, I think. Before we go into the quarterly kind of earnings announcement stuff, I wanted to mention that their dollar retention rate is 145%. So that basically means everybody who's paying them the next year, or not everybody, but the number of people paying them or the amount that they're paying them went up 145% in 2019. So we don't know what it's like very much this year yet. But according to the reports, we're seeing solid growth. But basically shows that people are loyal and people are willing to pay for this service. So in their second quarter report, they kind of put out 3 big headline numbers that are just kind of like, hey guys, look how awesome we're doing. First one was revenues of $215 million, which is up 49% year over year. Second headline was that they had added 8,000 new paid customers, which is always a good sign. Is it enough? Let's keep looking. And the third big headline was the number of clients that are paying them $1 million or more per year has almost doubled from 49 to 87 customers. That's super juicy, and that's the kind of stuff you like to see. For me, it's crazy imagining paying a chat company $1 million a year for my company, but there are companies that are really big, and when you're raising their productivity, that's just like, we would happily pay $1 million for that. That's no big deal. That being said, the number of customers paying them more than $100,000 per year and less than $1 million per year is also increasing, but growth has decelerated down to 37% growth rate. That's still a fantastic growth rate, but it's slowing down. One of their new offerings is called Connect, and it's basically, like I mentioned earlier, we have Slack in our organization and we all know how to use it and we all can see each other's accounts and stuff like that. Slack Connect is a similar thing, but it takes replacing email to the next level, where if you're talking with people in other companies or organizations and you know they have Slack, now we can communicate with all the benefits of Slack, except it's secure and it's through Slack's interface. So actually like making email kind of obsolete-ish in some ways. They mentioned that their paid customer growth is up 30% year over year, and they credit a lot of that growth to Connect. Users in Connect alone are up 160% year over year, up to 52,000 users now, which is really good growth. In an earlier video, I mentioned the difference between GAAP accounting and non-GAAP. And typically speaking, GAAP is generally acceptable accounting principles. Basically, hey, these are the rules everybody follows to come up with their net income and gross income and all these stuff and all these different factors. But non-GAAP is basically management knows better than everybody kind of what's going on with the company. Maybe there were big one-time expenses. Maybe there were like weird things happening because of like pandemics or things like that. So they say, let's exclude those figures for this time because those are special, and let's just present this number. When we look at those numbers for Slack, we see that the gross margin was 86.8%, which is like, whoa, that's freaking juicy. But we see the GAAP operating loss of almost 70 million. So you're like, dude, how are you getting such big margins but still having an operating loss? But they mentioned that their non-GAAP operating loss was only $6 million, or only 3% of revenues, compared to a 55 million loss from a year ago, same quarter. And you're like, you don't really know, do I trust the management enough to take their word on the non-GAAP, or should I just look at GAAP? It's a little bit tricky. They also mentioned in their report some other second quarter highlights. Over 130,000 paid customers, up 30% year over year. Another big factor they mentioned was over 380,000 connected endpoints on Slack Connect, which is up 200% year over year. And then they also acquired Remedo, a provider of enterprise directory software. So obviously we're seeing really good growth and we're seeing things move in the right direction. So what's up with this crazy stock price? There are a lot of different factors to think about. And when I was thinking about it, I found a few different things that you probably need to be really cautious about if you're thinking investing in Slack for the coming long term. I think we need to be careful of competitors like Microsoft. In the Microsoft video I did a little while back, I didn't talk much about Teams, but I talked about how sticky Microsoft clients are. there are like millions and millions of users around the world who are paying 60, 70 bucks a year to use Microsoft Office, Microsoft Office 365, things like that. And now Microsoft Teams is a free part of that. And so even though Microsoft Teams, which is really similar to Slack, has only been out for a year versus Slack's 4 years, they already have more users than Slack. And it's tricky to break down how much they're getting just for Microsoft Teams because they provide so many other things in there. But one of the really big concerns for Slack is that they don't have the thickest, deepest moat to protect them from big competitors like Microsoft. Microsoft Teams has only been out for a year and they already have 13 million users versus Slack's 10 million users in 4 years. That being said, as mentioned earlier, Slack is growing really well, especially during this time of large transition to working at home or to working remotely. Slack's still growing really well, and basically everybody who uses Slack loves it. So it has a bit of a like viral thing going on, and it definitely has a lower barrier to entry if you're kind of like a small business or just a couple of people and you're trying to figure out, how can we communicate better? Slack seems to be the easier choice and the more popular choice. That being said, a lot of Slack's users aren't actually paying Slack money, which is a similar problem we saw with Dropbox, where it's kind of like, how do we get all of our jillions of users to switch from just using us for free to actually paying? I think it's a bigger problem in Dropbox's case because we're seeing more conversion with Slack. But nevertheless, I think that's a concern we should have if you're investing in being an owner in Slack. A strong point that Slack has when compared to companies like Microsoft Teams or Cisco WebEx or those types of offerings is that Slack allows you to integrate many different apps. And I think it's something around 1,500 apps, whereas Teams and WebEx only offer kind of like 60 or 70 apps. And so if your whole workflow or if the way your company is used to doing things depends on one of those apps, in some cases, it's probably the case that you literally can only use Slack to get that integration. And just so you know, in many cases, to be able to use those integrations, connecting you to other apps or softwares, you do need to become a paid member. So that gives Slack a little bit of a moat, but it's one of those things where probably Teams and WebEx are gonna start ramping up the number of offerings that they have for integration. So we have a really tricky situation here where we have a really beloved stock. Everybody loves it, but stock prices isn't changing that much. And this kind of takes us back to our videos earlier about what is like the fair value of a company. One of the really tricky things, especially right now with tech, especially, is that people have really, really high hopes for companies. So take, for example, Tesla. You have like really, really crazy growth over the last kind of year. My Tesla holdings have like 1,000% growth over the last year. And that's building in a lot of the future hopes and expectations on the company. It's like, yeah, they're building the China factory. Now they're building the Texas factory and then Germany and all these things. These are things that aren't actually making money yet. But people are saying, oh, so once all of those are done, then they'll be able to make a lot of more cars and trucks in the future. Then they'll be able to be making this kind of money. So I'll be willing to pay this kind of stock price at that point, but I might as well get it now while it's cheap. And when there's millions of people who are thinking like that, then the stock price goes up now. And I think the same thing happened with Slack when it IPO'd. People are like, this is going to do really well, so we're willing to pay whatever it was, 40 bucks or whatever at IPO. And it kind of kept it up there. And then people started to realize like, whoa, this company actually isn't earning money enough, and nor does it have a growth prospect bright enough to be meriting that price. Hence the drops and the waves going on. So we have a market cap of about 16 billion on Slack, but we're only seeing annual sales of kind of like $1 billion-ish. These ratios aren't really crazy or super insane or anything like that. But we're seeing really good growth every quarter, number of users, number of revenues, but we're still seeing a loss. And it's like not that small of a loss either. Debt isn't a really big factor, but it's probably going to take a few more years before they actually become legit profitable. So does that merit that IPO price or even the $25 price that they're at right now? Personally, I don't think it does. I think $20, $18 stock price would be kind of cool. If it ever went down to 15 or less, I feel like it'd be pretty juicy. Still not super confident when it comes to the whole moat thing. I would vote for Microsoft in the long-term big picture before I would vote for Slack, as much as I love Slack. I do own Microsoft stock, don't own Slack stock, because I vote with my wallet when it comes to those things. But I don't think Slack has a big enough of a moat with bright enough future prospects for growth and monetization to merit anything more than maybe 15 bucks. And still, even if it was 15 bucks, it would just be like 1% of my portfolio or something like that. Those are my own thoughts. So yeah, we are starting to see a bit of a network effect. We are seeing a bit of like, kind of rose-colored belovedness of Slack. And I think it's a great company and I want to keep using them. And I might even need to start paying them soon for their services. But at the same time, if you're pretty sure they're not really going to be profitable in another 2 or 3 or 4 years, even at these growth rates, it's like there's probably better places to put your money now where you can start seeing profit multiplying, in the short term. All that being said, I think we need to take a step back and look at the major macro kind of picture. There is a big transition to working at home or working remotely or things like that. So I think Slack will continue to grow well. Slack will continue to do well. The current stock price just isn't appealing enough for me. All that being said, I really want to hear your opinion. I want to hear your thoughts. What do you think? Do you think this kind of analysis is accurate or helpful? Are you super in love with Slack, so you're just buying all of the stocks you can? Or what? I'd be really interested to hear your thesis, especially if you're buying the stock. Looking forward very much to hearing your thoughts down in the comment section below. I love you guys. Have a great day.